What's up, guys? I'm Phil. Let's talk about church photography. As a church technical director, I wear a lot of hats. I run sound, I do lights, I handle photography, I handle videography, I do a lot of editing. Now my assistant does a lot of editing too. So how do I go about doing photography in less than perfect lighting conditions? Most churches nowadays are going really dark with only a couple of spotlights and some color on the stage. So how do I overcome that without popping flash and being a huge distraction? I embrace the darkness. It doesn't matter how lit the rest of the sanctuary is, as long as the stage is perfectly lit or exposed for, I don't really care. I'll shoot through the congregation. I will get up close and get the shots that I need to. I'll use congregation's hands up in the air as a framing tool. And as long as my subjects on stage, whether it be the band, the pastor, a speaker of some sort, as long as they are perfectly exposed or perfectly lit, which isn't always the case, then I don't really care about the rest. I'll throw some examples up on screen of what I mean. If you see on a lot of these photos, I'm only exposing for who's on stage, and by now I fully expect that you know what the exposure triangle is. You have ISO, shutter speed, and f-stop, which is the aperture. If you don't, there's a ton of other videos on YouTube explaining what those are and how they relate to each other and getting a correct exposure. Now, for my situation, as you see in some of these photos, it's pretty dark. I know my settings are around 800 ISO to 1000 ISO, 1/125th of a second at 2.8. I shoot at 2.8 quite a bit, just so I can have the most available light coming in and I don't have to boost my ISO too high. And that brings me to my second point. Don't be afraid of high ISO. I've met photographers that they swear that they won't go over 500-600 ISO, and some that don't care. I'm on the latter. I don't care. As long as I capture the moment and I capture the essence of what I'm trying to capture, high ISO doesn't matter. I'd rather have a grainy shot than miss the shot because I was afraid of grain. Now this photo right here was shot at 3200 ISO. I bet you can't tell. You can't tell. I am looking at it really close. I can't tell a single piece of grain. People get caught up in pixel peeping on their laptop or their phone or whatever it may be. And of course, you're gonna see a little bit more grain, but once you print that photo out, you're not gonna see it. So I want you to go out there and test it. Push your ISO. Push it to where you think you could go. I bet you'll be surprised. Now, moving on to my next point, finding emotion in your shot. Now, if somebody's got their hands up, they're worshiping, they're in the moment, that is something that you want to get. Do not distract them. Do not break them out of that moment. That's the tricky part, being stealthy without getting in people's faces. That's why I always shoot at church with a 70-200 lens. One sec. This behemoth of a lens. It goes from 70 millimeters all the way to 200 millimeters at f2.8. Now, if it's your job to take the photo of pastor or whoever so that can be used for a thumbnail for a video or for your social media, make sure they're smiling. I know it's hard. You have to try to catch them on a smile. You have to catch them when they're not talking. That's extremely hard. So what really helps me is when I take a photo, I don't sit there and look at every single photo I take. That's called chimping. Quit doing it. So take the photo and stay on your subject. Click, click, click. Take 10 photos if you have to. And when you know you have a good one, then go back and check. In the early days, I really missed a lot of shots by going click, looking, click, looking. I know what I want. I know what my settings should be. And I know where I want my photo to go in post-processing. Which leads me to my next point, post-processing. I personally use Lightroom. I love it. I know it like the back of my hand. I can fly through the software. Built up a ton of presets that I will probably sell in the future, so keep an eye out for those. But I have a specific one that I created just for my church, so that when all pictures go out, they have generally the same look and feel. Every single photo that goes out looks like it came from the same source. We don't have a cell phone picture here. We don't have one shot from a Sony here, one from a Canon here, one from a Fujifilm and a Hasselblad. We have them all from Canon. Myself, I shoot on a Canon 5D Mark IV with a 24-70 as I'm filming with now, or the 70-200 as I said before. My assistant uses a Canon 80D with a couple of kit lenses, and he uses them really, really well. Let's go through how I post-process my images for the church. Okay, I've got a photo here that I took of one of our worship leaders. You might think it's a little underexposed, you might think it's perfectly exposed, but that's up to you. That's your personal style. This is how I like to shoot. I like to shoot a little underexposed, and I've set up a preset here that I generally go to so everything looks the same.
But Phil, how did you get to that preset?
About to show you. So if you look here, let me reset it. This is your first module here. You can do white balance, you can do your exposure, and you can do different effects like texture, clarity stuff, which I don't really touch that much. So we'll start here. Me, I like a super contrasty photo, not too crazy, but just about right there. I'll boost my shadows to taste, which sometimes means all the way up. I'll bring up my exposure to right about there. Whites, I don't generally touch too much because you can really ruin a photo by going one way or the other too extreme. So I move them ever so slightly in my blacks. I'll bring up ever so slightly. Texture is one of those faders that you can go mild or wild with. And again, you need to be real careful with these photos or with these sliders. So I don't go too crazy with it, plus 17. Clarity, I don't really touch. Vibrance, I like where it's at. It doesn't need to be any more vibrant than it is. Unless you want to go for a black and white, that's up to you. So, color temperature. Whenever you boost your contrast, it turns the image a little orange. It kind of oversaturates just a little bit on the skin tone. So how do you get around it? I change my skin tones with my temperature. So I'll bump it down ever so slightly. We're using all LED lighting in our sanctuary. So it's not the perfect white, but it helps. It's not tungsten. So I'll look for the best skin tones. What's the most natural looking skin tone? And that looks pretty good to me. Now, a lot of people are afraid of this tone curve. So what I like to do, I'll hit this intersection right there, create a dot. Hit this intersection in the middle, and I'll also hit this intersection here. I'll create these 3 dots. And then I will take my shadows, which are down here, and my highlights that are over here. I'll take my shadows and I'll bump it up ever so slightly. It gives it kind of a matte finish. So it's not so perfect. I'm gonna turn it on and off and you'll see the difference. It's a very subtle effect, but my personal style, I love it. Now, you'll say you'll see that he looks pretty orange. So I'll come over to my HSL color, which is hue, saturation, luminance, if you didn't already know. And I'll come to my saturation. I'll come to the orange, which is where skin tones lie. And I'll dump the skin tones ever so slightly so he's not so orange. If he starts to go a little bit dark, I go to the luminous on the orange and I bring him up ever so slightly. Highlights and shadows during split toning. I don't really touch for church photography because I'm not going for an artistic look. I'm going for a very natural look. Sharpening. Sharpening should be done on almost every photo. Don't go wild with it. So if you go here to your masking and you hit Option on a Mac, and I'm not sure what it is on Windows, but if you hit Option and then drag your slider on masking, you can decide what all you want to be sharpened. And then same with sharpen and the amount and the radius. Find what looks good to you. That looks pretty decent to me. The sharpening, I don't go wild on it because it's one of those sliders that you can really destroy an image if you take it too far. Noise reduction, again, so let me pull up my settings here. 1/25 at 2.8 at 800 ISO. You'll see a lot of noise in the shadow areas here, but it's not really that bad. If you think it's too bad, take your noise reduction, bring your luminance up a little bit, take your contrast up a little bit, and keep your detail right in the middle, and it should be a lot smoother. Lens correction. You can hear my laptop spinning up, about to take off. I always remove chromatic aberrations because it'll remove that purple outline that you'll see on a lot of cheaper lenses, and also profile correction. But that should just come up with whatever lens you are shooting with. If not, you can hit the search. Transform, I don't really touch unless I'm trying to straighten an image. So post-crop vignetting, this is something that you can do or you can leave alone. A lot of people do it. A lot of people just leave it alone. Some people take it to the extreme. It's really a preference of yours and whatever you want it to do. For me, I'll take it all the way down to 0, take it all the way down, then I take my feather and I feather it all the way in. And then I bring this back, the amount, to taste. Because I want my brightest thing in the image, which is the center, which is my worship leader, to be focused on. So those are the general settings that I use. And I may brighten it up in the end, and that may be the final image. I may even crop it in to about right there. Oh, note on cropping. So say you're cropping an image. Don't do this. Let me take that out. Don't do this, because he's looking at a wall right here. And there's a whole bunch of empty space here. So what you want to do is give him a little leading room to look into. This way, your graphic designer, your communications director, whoever it may be, can even put some text right here or a graphic if they wanted to. So I hope that kind of clears up some things about church photography. It's not the easiest job in the world. It's not the hardest job in the world. I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on it and overcomplicate it. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'll try to answer them as best I can. And hopefully, I hope I see you in the next video.